Most people who ride the R train through central Queens never look up. The stations between 63rd Drive and 67th Avenue pass in a blur. Beige tile, fluorescent light, and nothing worth a second glance. But step off at Forest Hills and walk 2 blocks south, and you are standing in a place that has more in common with the Silk Road than with the rest of New York City. An estimated 50,000 Bukharian Jews now live in these neighborhoods. That makes this the second largest Bukharian Jewish community on Earth. Only Israel has more. In Bukhara itself, the ancient city in Uzbekistan where this civilization was born, perhaps 100 Jews remain. The entire heartland emptied. It reassembled here. On 108th Street, between 63rd and 65th Avenues, a strip the community calls Bukharian Broadway, the signs are in Cyrillic, and the lingua franca is Russian. Kosher meat markets stand beside fruit vendors. Travel agencies sit next to fabric shops selling ikat textiles in patterns that have not changed in 3 centuries. Those textiles carry a deeper history than most visitors realize. Bukharian Jews once dominated the silk trade in Central Asia. In 30 years, the number of synagogues in these neighborhoods grew from 1 to more than 40. A museum in Elmhurst holds over 2,000 items, including a Torah 400 years old. The air here smells like cumin and baking bread. Women carry bags of round flatbread from bakeries where tandoor ovens glow against the back wall. This is not a neighborhood in transition. This is a neighborhood that has already been remade. The question is how a people cut off from the rest of the Jewish world for more than 2,000 years carried their language and their music and their food across the ocean and rebuilt everything they had lost in the residential blocks of a borough most of New York had stopped paying attention to. The answer begins a very long time ago. Bukharian Jews are one of the oldest Jewish diaspora groups on Earth. Their roots trace to the Babylonian exile. They are also one of the oldest ethno-religious communities in Central Asia. The name Bukharian means of Bukhara, the ancient city on the Silk Road, where Jews fleeing the persecution of the Persian king Peroz began to settle in the 5th century. For most of their history, they were cut off from the wider Jewish world. They survived waves of Muslim, Uzbek, and Russian invaders while preserving their faith and their identity across millennia. That continuity is almost impossible to overstate. This is a community that predates the Roman Empire. It now lives 30 minutes by subway from Times Square. In the late 18th century, a Moroccan rabbi named Joseph Maman Maghribi arrived in Bukhara and reshaped everything. He found a community that had preserved its Judaism in near total isolation, and he gave it a new liturgical framework. The Bukharian Jews, historically Mizrahi, adopted Sephardic customs under his influence. That grafting of traditions is part of what makes their religious life unlike any other branch of Judaism. Then came the 70 years that nearly destroyed it all. Under Soviet rule, the regime cracked down on organized religion. The dissemination of religious information was halted. Russian was forced on the region as the only acceptable language. The Bukharian language itself, Bukhari, is a dialect of Persian blended with Hebrew and Aramaic. It was used for all cultural and educational life among Central Asian Jews for centuries. By 1940, the Soviet regime had banned its promotion entirely. One elder Bukharian man in Queens, who would not give his name, once explained that Soviet rule forced them to practice their faith in secret. To be known was to be vulnerable. He said they used to wrap their Torah portions in Pravda newspapers. That single detail rewires how you understand everything that follows. A people who hid scripture inside state propaganda and then carried it out. The exodus from Central Asia to the United States began slowly in the 1970s and accelerated through the 80s. When the Soviet Union collapsed, waves of Bukharian Jews left for America and Israel. Some left for economic reasons. Others feared what might happen if an Islamist government came to power in Uzbekistan. As an ethnic minority, most Bukharian Jews were not proficient in the Uzbek language. They were excluded from nation building. Many were denied university admission. Others were dismissed from state employment. The new independence offered no place for them. They did not arrive in New York randomly. The New York Association for New Americans, founded in 1949, provided resettlement assistance to over 250,000 Jewish refugees from the former Soviet Union. It was this agency that steered the Bukharian arrivals toward Forest Hills and Rego Park. Zana Shimon, an associate broker who lives in the community, recalls that her family was forced to leave the Soviet Union in 1989 during violent unrest between Uzbeks and Turks. There was a military curfew. Soldiers stood every 10 meters. It was too dangerous to stay. They were allowed to leave with $90 per person and 5 grams of gold. Shimon has said that Bukharians chose Queens because they like to live in community. One settles and the others follow, and follow they did. The first Bukharian synagogue in New York, the Bukharian Jewish Community Center, had been established in 1963 on 70th Avenue between Austin Street and Queens Boulevard. It served the small number of Jews who had managed to leave Central Asia after the Second World War. By 1978, the community numbered about 1,000. They pooled their money, secured large contributions from wealthier members, took out a bank loan, bought a house on 112th Street, renovated it, and turned it into a synagogue. That was the anchor. Everything else grew around it. The community center today is more than a synagogue. It houses meeting rooms, social halls, a center for senior citizens, and the headquarters of the Bukharian Times newspaper. Boris Nektalov, a criminal defense attorney born in Samarkand who immigrated with his family at the age of 8, walks through the building greeting staff and fellow members in Russian with a handshake or a hug. Like many in the community, he is trilingual in English, Russian, and Bukhari. His father, Raphael, serves as editor-in-chief of the Bukharian Times. Boris organizes community events and chases down leads for articles alongside him. The newspaper circulates weekly, alongside another publication called Druzhba. Both are free and found in local businesses, synagogues, and restaurants throughout Queens. On a weekday afternoon, 108th Street hums with a specific kind of life. The Rokat Kosher Bakery is an unadorned space filled with the scent of fresh dough. Bakers press rounds of noni toki against the curved clay wall of a tandoor oven. It takes between 10 and 15 minutes to bake each loaf. The breads are used as part of weekly Shabbat celebrations. Beside the tandoor loaves sit trays of samsa, meat-filled pastries folded into triangles, and stacks of chak, a fried honey cake whose name means chatter. The bakery has no decoration to speak of. The bread is the decoration. Down the block, the supermarkets tell their own story. Soviet-style grocers like Gastronome and Netcost stock shelves with Central Asian staples. Yellow carrots for PLOV sit beside bundles of fresh dill and cilantro. Whole heads of garlic fill bins near bags of chickpeas and black currants. Plov, the national dish of Uzbekistan, is the centerpiece of every Bukharian gathering. At weddings, a single cauldron can feed 1,000 guests. Then there is Oshi Sabo, the Bukharian answer to the Ashkenazi kolet. It is a meal in a pot, rice and meat and vegetables and dried fruit, cooked slowly overnight and eaten hot for Shabbat lunch. The fruit gives it a sweet and sour taste, unlike anything else in the Jewish culinary world. Further down the boulevard, the catering halls tell a different story. On any given night, restaurants like King David on Queens Boulevard are filled with Bukharian families celebrating weddings or lighting memorial candles for lost relatives. King David, founded by Abo Shakarov in 1998, has hosted thousands of weddings, bar mitzvah ceremonies, and Passover seders. At Passover, families wear the joma, a colorful Bukharian kaftan embroidered with gold thread. Both men and women dress in it because it represents royalty and freedom. The tradition may date to a time under the Bukharan Emirate, when discriminatory laws forced Jews to wear distinct, drab clothing to mark their second-class status. Instead of accepting shame, they chose the most luxurious garments they could afford. Lana Levitin, a real estate broker and manager of the Bukharian musical ensemble Makam, explains that every day, every restaurant is full. With 50,000 Jews, everyone has someone to remember. Memorial celebrations called Yushvo are held annually for family members who have died. Weddings draw 300 to 500 guests on average. The community once had to travel to Great Neck on Long Island for these events. Then, the catering halls started appearing in Queens, and they never had to leave again. The music inside those halls carries a weight that most listeners do not immediately understand. Shashmakom is a classical music tradition born in the courts of Central Asia. The word means 6 modes or 6 makams. For centuries, under the patronage of the Bukharian Emirates, Jewish and Muslim musicians worked side by side to develop it into one of the most sophisticated classical systems in the world. In 2003, UNESCO included Shashmakom on its list of intangible cultural heritage. Fatima Quinova, a founding member and vocalist of the Shashmakom Ensemble, received a National Heritage Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts in 1992. In 2012, the Congress of Bukharian Jews of the United States and Canada organized the first Shashmakom Forever Festival at Carnegie Hall. The court music of Bukharian emirs, nearly destroyed by Soviet cultural policy, performed under the chandeliers of one of the most famous concert halls on earth. David Mavashev, a Tajik-born Jew who runs the Iskak Mavashev Foundation named for his father, and historian of Shashmakom, says the music is never the same twice. He compares it to jazz. Every time it is new. On a Tuesday evening in Forest Hills, the ensemble rehearses in a conference room. The tandoor and the douar and the tar fill a space designed for quarterly budget meetings. No account of this music in Queens is complete without Malayev. Born in 1936 in the city of Merv, in what is now Turkmenistan, Malayev learned to play the tar and the tandoor as a child. In Tashkent, tens of thousands of fans filled stadiums to hear him perform. The Soviet state named him Honored Artist of the Uzbek SSR. But because he was Jewish, he could not get his poetry published. He emigrated to Queens in 1992. He shared a 3-room apartment with 9 people and survived on welfare. He borrowed money to self-publish 1,000 copies of his poetry collection called Milk and Sugar. He gave performances in his apartment. He died in Forest Hills in 2008 at the age of 72. Walter Feldman, an expert on Ottoman Turkish music, once said Malayev was one of maybe half a dozen people in the world with such deep knowledge of the Shashmakom. A man who filled stadiums in Uzbekistan played his final concerts in a living room in Queens. The man who has worked hardest to preserve all of this in physical form is Aaron Aronov. He is described as a legendary figure in the community. Aronov worked as a translator in Tashkent and proudly recalls that he translated for Richard Nixon when the president visited Uzbekistan. He moved to the United States in 1989 and founded the Bukharian Jewish Museum. His collection now exceeds 1,000 items. The museum occupies 2 cramped classrooms that a local school lent him. Inside those rooms are textiles and Torah scrolls and photographs and musical instruments that span centuries. Aronov has said that New York is not a melting pot but a mosaic of different groups, and that his mission is to make sure the Bukharian piece of that mosaic does not disappear. 1 man, 2 borrowed classrooms, the material memory of an entire civilization. The community grew so fast that the original settlement spilled over its borders. Queens Boulevard between the 63rd Drive and 67th Avenue subway stops now functions as a second Bukharian Broadway. Families expanded into Rego Park, then further into Kew Gardens Hills, Fresh Meadows, and Jamaica Estates. Community observers note that the Bukharian residents of Kew Gardens Hills tend to be younger, better educated, and more religious than their parents and grandparents who stayed in Forest Hills. They are more comfortable in English than in Russian. The older generation became entrepreneurs, shoemakers, hairdressers, jewelers, real estate agents, caterers. The younger generation fills medical schools and law firms and accounting offices. Journals and newspapers circulate weekly, mostly in Russian. 3 theater troupes perform regularly. At least a dozen synagogues, all Orthodox, serve the community alongside day schools and yeshivot and youth groups. And on Friday evening, when Shabbat begins, the tables in these homes groan under the weight of what is being served. Every Bukharian Sabbath opens with a dish of fried fish covered in a pounded sauce of garlic and cilantro. There will always be meat. Community members joke that if you have a meal without meat, then you need to eat a little more later. 3 or 4 generations sit at the same table. Russian and Bukhari and English move between courses like the food itself. But a community that builds this visibly does not go unnoticed. To Bukharian Jews, a large house is not vanity, it is tradition. A place to shelter multiple generations, to host weddings and memorials and holiday dinners, to affirm that the family has survived. In the Kordmeyer section of Forest Hills, an upper-middle-class neighborhood long cherished for its quiet Tudor and Georgian and Cape Cod homes, Bukharian families began tearing down the older houses and erecting white brick edifices with sweeping balustrades and stone lions flanking the front steps. Albert Dayan, an attorney and Bukharian Jew who grew up in Queens, has explained that the new homes are larger because they need to be. The average Bukharian household includes 3 generations and about 4 children. A Tudor cottage cannot hold that. The neighbors did not see tradition. They saw disruption. Turquoise columns and gold leaf iron fences clashed with the sedate character of the surrounding streets. Richard Hellenbrecht, vice president of the Queens Civic Congress, called the new homes an absolute disgrace and said that lovely, affordable houses were being squeezed out. In 2009, the Department of City Planning adjusted building requirements for the Kordmeyer area to limit what it called out-of-character construction. Then in 2015, a series of arson attacks targeted the community. 5 of 7 fires struck Bukharian homes, all buildings under construction and uninhabited. Investigators speculated that the attacks were connected to the years of controversy over the new architecture. Boris Kandov, president of the Bukharian Jewish Congress, has attributed the community's building style to something deeper than taste. He speaks of dreams of affluence, security, and symbolic freedom. A people who hid their faith inside Pravda newspapers now build homes that refuse to hide anything. Inside the community, a different tension runs quietly. Emanuel Rybakov, who teaches a course on Bukharian history and culture at Queens College, has said that the community is successfully integrating into American Jewish society, but at the same time losing a great deal of its ethnic culture. Rabbi Itzhak Yehoshua, the chief rabbi of the Bukharian Jews in the United States, estimates that about 20% of the community is Orthodox, 60% is traditional but not fully observant, and 20% is unaffiliated. He has said that he urges modesty among his congregation to ease tensions with neighbors, but that he meets resistance. Community members tell him that their home is their fortress, their place of entertainment. They work very hard, and this is their understanding of America. The narrator of this story does not resolve the tension because it is not resolved. The zoning codes changed. The homes kept rising. The music kept playing. Friday afternoon on 108th Street. The bakeries run their last tandoor rounds before sundown. A grandmother in a long dress carries a bag of round flatbread under one arm and holds the hand of a small child with the other. They walk toward a white brick house on a residential street where the iron gate stands open. Through the ground floor window, a table is already set. The platters are large enough for 4 generations. Somewhere inside, the smell of fried fish and garlic rises toward the ceiling. 500 years ago in Bukhara, you would have heard shashmakom drifting from the palace of an emir. Now it drifts from a conference room in Forest Hills. Aaron Aronov once said he was not afraid to die. but he was afraid to disappear from this world without leaving any trace. The gate closes. The bread is still warm.